From stars who couldn't stop laughing on set to a method actress demanding real slaps, the 1957 Western classic Gunfight at the OK Corral hides bizarre secrets behind its legendary shootout. Between geographical impossibilities, a future Star Trek doctor's triple gunfight curse, and Mel Brooks' accidental comedy inspiration, this Burt Lancaster and Kirk Douglas vehicle is far stranger than the dusty streets of Tombstone suggest. Here are the 15 weird facts you didn't know about Gunfight at the OK Corral. Fact 1. Douglas and Lancaster laughed until the director sent them home. Kirk Douglas and Burt Lancaster were supposed to be filming a tense saloon rescue scene for Gunfight at the OK Corral, but instead, they turned the set into a comedy club that drove director John Sturges absolutely crazy. The two stars, who had already worked together on several films and had developed a close friendship, found themselves completely unable to keep straight faces during what was meant to be a serious, masculine moment of Western heroics. Take after take, they would burst into uncontrollable laughter, finding the whole, over-the-top machismo of the scene utterly ridiculous. The more they tried to be tough and stoic, the funnier it became to them. And soon they were howling with laughter while the crew and director waited impatiently. Douglas later recalled that they just couldn't take themselves seriously in that particular moment, despite both being consummate professionals who rarely broke character. The giggles were contagious, spreading between them until neither could deliver a single line without cracking up. After burning through multiple takes and wasting valuable production time, Sturges finally threw his hands up in frustration and made an unusual decision. He dismissed both actors from the set for the entire day, essentially sending them home like misbehaving schoolchildren who couldn't control themselves in class. The production had to reschedule the scene for another day when hopefully the two leading men could compose themselves and actually complete the work. It was a rare moment of unprofessionalism from two highly respected actors. But it also revealed the genuine friendship and chemistry that made their on-screen partnership so compelling throughout the film. Fact 2. Kirk Douglas choreographed every single cough. Playing Doc Holliday meant Kirk Douglas had to portray a man slowly dying from tuberculosis, and the actor approached this challenge with an almost obsessive level of detail and planning that surprised everyone on set. Rather than just coughing randomly whenever he felt it was appropriate for the character, Douglas meticulously choreographed every single cough that would appear throughout the entire film. He sat down with the script and carefully mapped out exactly how many coughs would occur in each scene, what type of cough each one would be, and how severe it should sound. Some coughs were light and suppressed, showing Doc trying to maintain his dignity and hide his illness. Others were harsh and violent, revealing the true extent of his deteriorating condition. Douglas understood that tuberculosis doesn't progress evenly, and he wanted to show the disease's unpredictable nature while also maintaining perfect continuity for the editors. Since films are shot out of sequence, he knew that a cough in a scene filmed on Tuesday might actually come before a scene filmed on Thursday in the final movie. If he wasn't careful about planning, Doc could seem sicker in an earlier scene than in a later one, which would destroy the believability of his character's decline. Douglas created what was essentially a coughing roadmap, noting in his script exactly when and how Doc would cough, ensuring that the progression of his illness would track logically throughout the story. This level of technical preparation was typical of Douglas's intense approach to acting, but it still amazed his co-stars and the crew who had never seen an actor plan something so specific and seemingly minor with such mathematical precision. Fact 3. Jo Van Fleet asked Kirk Douglas to really hit her. Jo Van Fleet was a serious method actress who believed in doing whatever it took to deliver an authentic performance, and her approach to a particular scene in Gunfight at the OK Corral shocked everyone who witnessed it. Fleet played Kate Fisher, Doc Holliday's romantic interest, who endures an abusive relationship, and there was a scene that required Kirk Douglas to slap her character across the face. For most actors, this would involve careful choreography and pulled punches that look real on camera but don't actually hurt. Fleet had different ideas about how to shoot the scene. She repeatedly approached Douglas before it takes and asked him, quite seriously, to actually hit her, for real. She wanted to feel the genuine shock and pain of being struck so she could give the most honest reaction possible. Douglas was uncomfortable with the request, but Fleet insisted that she needed the real physical experience to get into character properly. The ritual happened multiple times, with Fleet asking for real slaps before each take. Burt Lancaster watched this bizarre pre-take preparation with visible discomfort, later describing what he witnessed as almost sadomasochistic in nature. He couldn't understand why anyone would voluntarily subject themselves to actual violence for a movie scene when skilled actors could fake it convincingly. Douglas eventually agreed to Fleet's requests, though he reportedly held back considerably and didn't hit her with full force. Fleet's dedication to method acting techniques was intense and uncompromising, representing an era when actors believed that physical and emotional authenticity required genuine suffering. The scene made it into the final film, and Fleet's reaction does carry an undeniable, raw quality that might not have been achievable through pure acting technique alone. Fact 4. The 30-second gunfight took 4 days to film. The actual historical gunfight at the OK Corral in Tombstone, Arizona on October 26, 1881 was shockingly brief. The inch deadly encounter lasted approximately 30 seconds from first shot to last, with witnesses reporting that 34 bullets were exchanged between the Earp brothers and their allies against the Clanton and McClory gang. In that half-minute of chaos, 3 men died and several others were wounded, making it one of the most famous gunfights in American history despite its brevity. When director John Sturges set out to recreate this legendary moment for the 1957 film, he faced an interesting challenge. A 30-second gunfight wouldn't satisfy audiences who had sat through nearly 2 hours of buildup, so the screen version was expanded dramatically. The movie's climactic shootout runs for approximately 5 minutes of screen time, turning the quick historical skirmish into an extended action sequence with dramatically staged shots, close-ups of faces, reaction shots, and carefully choreographed gunplay. To film even this relatively short 5-minute sequence, the production required 4 full days of shooting. Each angle had to be carefully lit and staged. Every gun blast needed to be coordinated with special effects charges that would simulate bullet impacts, and the actors had to repeat the same actions multiple times from different camera positions to give the editors enough footage to cut together a coherent sequence. The complexity of coordinating multiple actors firing blanks, extras falling as if shot, and practical effects going off in precise timing meant that only a few seconds of usable footage could be captured in each take. The 4-day shoot for one scene was actually fairly efficient by Hollywood standards, but it remains a fascinating contrast to the actual 30-second confrontation that inspired it. Fact 5. Humphrey Bogart was originally wanted for Doc Holliday. Producer Hal Wallace had a very different vision for Gunfight at the OK Corral before Kirk Douglas and Burt Lancaster became attached to the project. Wallace originally wanted to build the film around Humphrey Bogart, who would have played the tubercular gambler Doc Holliday opposite Lancaster's Wyatt Earp. The pairing made perfect sense given Bogart's screen presence and his ability to play cynical, world-weary characters with hidden nobility, which would have fit Doc Holliday beautifully. Wallace also envisioned Barbara Stanwyck taking on a major female role in the production, which would have given the film a different dynamic entirely. However, Bogart's declining health made the casting impossible. The legendary actor was battling esophageal cancer during the film's pre-production phase, and by the time cameras were ready to roll, Bogart was far too ill to take on such a physically demanding role. Kirk Douglas stepped into the part instead, bringing his own intense energy and method acting approach to Doc Holliday. The casting change proved fortunate for the film, as Douglas and Lancaster had already established an easy chemistry in previous collaborations. Tragically, Humphrey Bogart died on January 14, 1957, just months before Gunfight at the OK Corral was released to theaters in May of that same year. Audiences watching the film had no idea they were seeing the role that Bogart had been considered for, and that the actor had passed away so recently. The film became a hit for Douglas and Lancaster, but it's fascinating to imagine how different the movie might have been with Bogart's distinctive gravelly voice and weathered screen persona bringing Doc Holliday to life in what would have been one of his final performances. Fact 6. DeForest Kelley fought at the OK Corral 3 times. DeForest Kelley is best known to science fiction fans as Dr. Leonard McCoy on Star Trek, but years before he ever said, "I'm a doctor, not a bricklayer," he had a strange and unique distinction in Hollywood history. Kelley appeared in 3 completely different productions about the famous gunfight at the OK Corral, playing 3 entirely different people involved in the same historical event. His first appearance came in 1955 on the television series You Are There, a Walter Cronkite-hosted show that recreated famous historical moments as if modern journalists were covering them live. In that episode, Kelley played Ike Clanton, one of the outlaws who faced off against the Earps. Just 2 years later, Kelley switched sides completely for the 1957 film Gunfight at the OK Corral, this time playing Morgan Earp, one of Wyatt Earp's brothers and a deputy marshal fighting against the Clantons. Then, in a bizarre full-circle moment, Kelley returned to the OK Corral yet again in 1968 for the Star Trek episode titled Spectre of the Gun. In that surreal science fiction take on the famous gunfight, Kelley played Tom McClory, another member of the outlaw gang opposing the Earps. So across 13 years and 3 different productions, Kelley portrayed someone on both sides of the famous confrontation multiple times. No other actor in Hollywood history can claim to have participated in the OK Corral shootout 3 separate times in 3 different roles. It's a piece of trivia that delights both Western fans and Star Trek enthusiasts, representing a weird convergence of Kelley's career in both genres before he found his most famous role as the Enterprise's cantankerous chief medical officer. Fact 7. Dennis Hopper was born in Wyatt Earp's real Dodge City. When young Dennis Hopper was cast to play Billy Clanton in Gunfight at the OK Corral, the production had no idea they were hiring an actor with a genuine biographical connection to the real Wyatt Earp's history. Hopper was born on May 17, 1936, in Dodge City, Kansas, and spent his childhood years in that legendary frontier town. Dodge City holds a special place in Western history and in Wyatt Earp's biography specifically. Before Earp became famous for the gunfight in Tombstone, Arizona, he served as a lawman in Dodge City during the 1870s, working as an assistant marshal and helping to tame one of the wildest cattle towns in the American West. The real Wyatt Earp walked the same streets that young Dennis Hopper would walk decades later, though separated by more than 50 years. By the time Hopper was growing up in Dodge City during the 1940s, the town had long since transformed from a rowdy frontier settlement into a typical American small town, but the legends and history of its past remained very much alive in local culture. For Hopper, being cast in a film about Wyatt Earp must have felt like a strange homecoming to his Kansas roots, even though he was playing one of Earp's enemies rather than the famous marshal himself. The coincidence that a kid from Earp's old stomping grounds ended up in a major Hollywood film about Earp's most famous moment is the kind of random historical connection that's too perfect to be anything but true. Hopper would go on to become one of the most influential actors and directors of his generation with films like Easy Rider, but his connection to Wyatt Earp's Dodge City remains a fascinating footnote in both men's stories. Fact 8. Lancaster used his circus acrobat skills for stunts. Long before Burt Lancaster became one of Hollywood's biggest stars, he made his living performing death-defying feats under circus tents across America. Lancaster and his childhood friend Nick Cravat formed an acrobatic duo called Lang and Cravat in the early 1930s, performing as horizontal bar and trapeze artists with various circuses and vaudeville shows. Lancaster's background as a professional acrobat gave him physical skills that few other actors could match, and he carried those abilities throughout his entire film career. For Gunfight at the OK Corral, Lancaster insisted on performing his own stunts whenever possible, refusing to let stunt doubles take the risk or glory. The most spectacular example comes during the film's climactic shootout sequence when Lancaster's Wyatt Earp makes a dramatic running dive for cover as bullets fly around him. While most actors would have been replaced by a stuntman for such a dangerous and physically demanding moment, Lancaster performed the dive himself with the grace and precision that came from years of circus training. The move looks effortless on screen, with Lancaster launching himself through the air and rolling smoothly across the ground, but it required real athletic ability and timing to execute properly while also maintaining his character. Lancaster's circus background influenced his entire approach to physical acting throughout his career. He moved with unusual fluidity and confidence in action sequences, performing climbs, jumps, fights, and falls that would have terrified actors without his training. Directors loved working with him because they could stage ambitious physical sequences knowing Lancaster could actually perform them. His former circus partner, Nick Cravat, appeared in several Lancaster films, and the two would occasionally perform informal acrobatic routines on set between takes, entertaining cast and crew with glimpses of their old act. Fact 9. The film references Oklahoma City before it existed. Historical accuracy in Western films has always been somewhat flexible, but Gunfight at the OK Corral includes one error that's particularly glaring for anyone familiar with Oklahoma history. At several points in the film, characters make references to Oklahoma City as if it's an established place that they remember from the past. They reminisce about events that supposedly occurred there and discuss it as a known location that everyone would be familiar with. The problem is that the film is set in the early 1880s, specifically around the time of the October 1881 gunfight, and Oklahoma City simply did not exist yet. The city that would become Oklahoma's capital wasn't founded until April 22, 1889, during the famous land run when the unassigned lands were opened for settlement. On that day, approximately 10,000 hopeful settlers raced into the territory at noon to claim parcels of land, and Oklahoma City sprang into existence almost overnight. Before that momentous event, the area was unclaimed territory with no permanent settlement or city of any kind. The screenwriters apparently didn't check their dates carefully enough and assumed that Oklahoma City was old enough to be mentioned in an 1880s set story. To be fair, Oklahoma Territory does have a complicated history with various tribal lands, unassigned territories, and shifting boundaries that can confuse people not deeply versed in the subject. But the mention of Oklahoma City existing nearly a decade before it was actually founded represents the kind of anachronistic mistake that pulls historically aware viewers right out of the story. It's a relatively small error in the grand scheme of the film, and most audiences probably never noticed it. But for history buffs and Oklahoma residents who know their state's founding story, it stands out as an amusing oversight. Fact 10. Saguaro cacti appear in geographically impossible locations. One of the most persistent and easily spotted errors in Western films is the appearance of saguaro cacti in locations where they could never possibly grow. And Gunfight at the OK Corral commits this botanical sin repeatedly throughout the film. The tall, iconic saguaro cactus, with its distinctive arms reaching toward the sky, has become a symbol of the American West in popular culture, appearing in countless movies, cartoons, and advertisements. However, saguaros are actually extremely limited in their natural range. These giant cacti grow exclusively in the Sonoran Desert, which covers parts of southern Arizona and northwestern Mexico. They cannot survive outside this specific region because they're extremely sensitive to frost and require particular soil conditions and climate patterns. Despite this biological reality, filmmakers constantly place saguaros wherever they need a quick visual shorthand for the Old West. In Gunfight at the OK Corral, saguaro cacti appear prominently in scenes set in Fort Griffin, Texas, and throughout sequences supposedly taking place on the Kansas plains. Neither location could ever support saguaro growth. Fort Griffin was an actual historical fort in north-central Texas, hundreds of miles from the nearest saguaro habitat. Kansas, even farther north and east, has a completely different ecosystem with cold winters that would kill any saguaro within a single season. The filmmakers likely shot many of these scenes in Southern California or Arizona, where saguaros do grow naturally, and simply didn't worry about whether the geography matched the story's setting. To their credit, the Tombstone scenes could legitimately feature saguaros since the real Tombstone is in southern Arizona within the Sonoran Desert region. But every time a saguaro appears during the Kansas or Texas sequences, it's a glaring impossibility that reminds viewers they're watching a Hollywood production rather than experiencing authentic locations. Fact 11. This movie actually named the famous gunfight. Before 1957, the famous shootout in Tombstone, Arizona was known by various names and wasn't nearly as cemented in American popular culture as it would later become. Some called it the gunfight near the OK Corral. Others referred to it simply as the Earp-Clanton fight or the Tombstone shootout. The event was historically significant in its time, but decades had passed and it had faded somewhat from public consciousness. When Paramount Pictures released Gunfight at the OK Corral with Burt Lancaster and Kirk Douglas in the lead roles, the film's title did more than just identify the movie. It effectively branded the historical event with a name that would stick forever. After the film became a major box office success, the name Gunfight at the OK Corral became the standard way to refer to the 1881 confrontation, and it has remained so ever since. But the movie did more than just give the gunfight its famous name. It also perpetuated a geographical misconception that most people still believe to this day. The film's title and dramatic staging convinced audiences that the shootout actually took place inside the OK Corral itself, with cowboys and lawmen facing off in the enclosed space of a horse corral. In reality, the confrontation occurred in a vacant lot on Fremont Street, approximately 6 doors down from the rear entrance to the actual OK Corral. The lot was near the corral, which is why it got mentioned in early accounts, but the fighting never entered the corral property itself. The film's success was so complete that it essentially rewrote history in the popular imagination, cementing both a name and a location that aren't quite historically accurate. Documentary filmmakers and historians have tried to correct this misconception for decades, but the movie's version remains what most people think of when they hear about the famous gunfight. Fact 12. Frankie Lane's theme song inspired Mel Brooks' Blazing Saddles. The opening title sequence of Gunfight at the OK Corral features one of the most over-the-top, bombastic Western theme songs ever recorded. Composer Dmitri Tiomkin created the music, but it was Frankie Lane's powerful, melodramatic vocal performance that made the song unforgettable. Lane sang about the legendary OK Corral with such intense earnestness and dramatic flair that it became both thrilling and unintentionally hilarious at the same time. The song was a massive hit, reaching number 3 on the Billboard charts and earning an Academy Award nomination, but it also represented everything that was becoming ripe for parody about the Western genre. 17 years later, when comedy legend Mel Brooks set out to create his satirical Western masterpiece Blazing Saddles, he remembered the grandiose opening of Gunfight at the OK Corral. Brooks wanted to parody those overblown Western title songs, and he specifically cited the Frankie Lane performance as one of his inspirations. In a stroke of comedic genius, Brooks decided that the best way to parody Lane would be to get Lane himself to sing the theme for Blazing Saddles. Brooks deliberately wrote lyrics that were even more absurdly dramatic than typical Western songs, packed with ridiculous images and over-the-top Western cliches. Then he approached Frankie Lane with the offer to sing the title song. The brilliant part of Brooks's plan was that he never told Lane the film was a comedy. Lane thought he was recording a theme for a serious Western, so he delivered the performance with complete sincerity and dramatic intensity, giving it his full theatrical power. The result is perfect because Lane's genuine earnestness makes the absurd lyrics even funnier, creating one of the most memorable comedy songs in film history, while also serving as a loving tribute to the bombastic style that Lane had pioneered. Fact 13. Lancaster demanded this film to get another role. Burt Lancaster's relationship with producer Hal Wallace was complicated and often contentious. Tombstone, representing the changing power dynamics in Hollywood as the old studio system began to crumble. Lancaster had signed a contract with Wallace years earlier when he was still a relatively unknown actor trying to break into films, and by the mid-1950s, Lancaster desperately wanted out of that contract so he could have more control over his career. When Wallace approached Lancaster about starring in Gunfight at the OK Corral, the actor saw an opportunity to negotiate. Lancaster told Wallace that he would agree to make the Western only if Wallace would also cast him in a completely different project that Lancaster was passionate about. That project was The Rainmaker, a dramatic film based on N. Richard Nash's successful Broadway play about a con man who brings hope to a drought-stricken Kansas farm family. Lancaster wanted the role of Starbuck the Rainmaker because it would showcase his dramatic range and allow him to work with actress Katharine Hepburn, and he knew Wallace owned the film rights. Lancaster essentially held Gunfight at the OK Corral hostage until Wallace agreed to the package deal. Wallace reluctantly accepted because he knew Lancaster was perfect for Wyatt Earp and would make the Western a success. The arrangement worked out for everyone involved. Gunfight at the OK Corral became one of the highest-grossing Westerns of the 1950s, and The Rainmaker earned Lancaster an Academy Award nomination for Best Actor. More importantly for Lancaster, making both films fulfilled his final obligations under his contract with Wallace, finally freeing him from the agreement and allowing him to pursue independent production deals. The episode perfectly illustrated how actors were beginning to assert more control over their careers and use their star power to negotiate better terms. Fact 14. Exposed special effects wires dangle visibly in the final gunfight. Creating convincing bullet hits in action sequences requires careful coordination between actors, special effects technicians, and camera operators, and even major Hollywood productions sometimes let visible evidence of their tricks slip through into the final cut. During the climactic shootout sequence in Gunfight at the OK Corral, when bullets are supposedly slamming into walls and kicking up splinters, the special effects team used a common technique for the era. They pre-rigged small explosive charges called squibs on the set walls, connected by wires to a control box, where technicians could detonate them at precisely the right moment to simulate bullet impacts. When a squib exploded, it would blow a hole in the surface, creating dust and debris that looked convincingly like a bullet strike. The problem was that the wires connecting these charges to the control box had to be carefully hidden or removed in post-production. In at least one shot during the final gunfight, this cleanup didn't happen properly. After a squib detonates and creates a dramatic bullet hit effect on a wall, the wires that triggered the charge are clearly visible, falling and dangling in the frame for several seconds. For viewers watching on small television screens when the film aired on broadcast TV in later decades, these wires might have been difficult to spot. But for anyone watching on a large theater screen or on modern high-definition displays, the exposed special effects work is glaringly obvious. It's the kind of continuity error that makes modern audiences wonder how it made it past multiple editors and quality control checks before the film was released. The reality is that filmmakers in the 1950s were less concerned about such details because they knew most audience members would be too caught up in the action to notice small technical flaws, and rewatching scenes frame by frame simply wasn't possible for general audiences the way it is today. Fact 15. Hedda Hopper called the stars the Terrible Twins. Hollywood gossip columnist Hedda Hopper wielded enormous power in the film industry during the 1940s and 50s, and her opinions could make or break careers with a single published paragraph. When Hopper looked at Burt Lancaster and Kirk Douglas, she saw something that both fascinated and disturbed her about the changing nature of Hollywood. Both actors had broken away from the traditional studio system that had controlled every aspect of stars' careers for decades. Instead of remaining under exclusive long-term contracts to single studios, Lancaster and Douglas had each formed their own production companies, giving them unprecedented control over which projects they chose and how those projects were made. To Hopper, this represented a betrayal of old Hollywood's established order, where studios functioned as benevolent dictators who guided stars' careers and protected the industry's interests. Lancaster had formed Hecht Hill Lancaster Productions with his agent Harold Hecht and writer James Hill, while Douglas had created Bryna Productions, named after his mother. These independent production companies allowed both actors to develop their own projects, hire their own directors, and negotiate better financial deals than the studio system would ever have offered them. Hopper devoted an entire chapter in one of her books to Lancaster and Douglas, dubbing them the Terrible Twins for their rebellious approach to career management. The nickname was meant as criticism, suggesting they were naughty children, refusing to respect their elders and the traditional way of doing things. But to Lancaster and Douglas, being called Terrible Twins was probably a badge of honor. They were part of a larger movement that would eventually dismantle the studio system entirely and give actors much more agency over their professional lives. By the time they made Gunfight at the OK Corral together, both were established rebels who proved that stars could succeed without surrendering their autonomy to the studios.